Hey everyone, I'm Tyler Mandry, and I'm here with Teor from the Rust Foundation, who's working on interop between Rust and C++. Um, Teor, let's maybe start by going back to the beginning. Like, what was your first experience with programming like, and how did you get into it?
Gosh, it was a while ago. So I started programming on HyperCard, which is an Apple scripting language that is, kind of turned into AppleScript. But yeah, natural language like programming. Then I think I leapt into more closer to the operating system, so C++, Pascal, those kinds of languages. And yeah, started writing small programs on my Mac at home, and then went on to uni to study a bunch of different languages. I think they tried to fit, I don't know what it was, 10 different languages in 3 years or something. It was a lot.
Mm. Have you been a diehard Apple fan ever since the early days?
I mean, I think I was more of an Apple fan previously. The things, large companies and software and hardware products get worse and worse over time. So yeah,
Makes
I
sense.
think we've all seen that happen.
Yep. Um, cool. So you were working on, you said HyperCard and Pascal.
Yep.
I admit those are two languages I have never written a line of, though I have seen a little bit of Pascal. I started out with QBasic, I think, and I could appreciate Pascal when I saw it. It's like, wow, that's way more advanced. I ended up going into like Visual Basic and then C++ of all things. But you've written a little bit of C++ in your time as well, right?
Yeah. So I wrote a bunch of C++ at university. I think it was concurrency, and which is a nightmare in C++, and also some work on graphics and different things like that. And then wrote C and C for the Tor project and C++ for a bunch of cryptocurrencies. So yeah, written a bit of C++.
Interesting. So you've actually gotten involved in Tor, which is, I think of it as like the privacy preserving web browser kind of thing. And was that work on any layer in particular, or were you like bouncing all around the project?
I was mainly on the Tor network daemon, so the code that sends the private communications and relays them across a bunch of different nodes on the internet to hide where they've come from. And so, yes, did a lot of networking in C. Am responsible for multiple security bugs, both fixing them and also introducing them to millions of users, which is, you never forget your first time. That was
I would be
a shock.
kind of terrified, honestly. I mean, I have tried, I have attempted to write networking code in C++, and it wasn't the best time, to be honest with you. So I can sympathize. Yeah. Thankfully, I never went to production, at least in my case. How did you first encounter Rust?
So because of that, history of terrible bugs, the Tor project started experimenting with Rust in, I think it was 2018, and starting to write some of the parsing libraries in Rust, because you're parsing untrusted input that anybody in the internet can send you. And so it's nice to have a bit of memory safety in that code rather than having to check every line to make sure you haven't leaked something or overwritten something else. So that was why we started experimenting with that. So I got a lot of experience with manual low-level interop at that stage and just writing our own bindings, because I don't think there are a lot of tools back then to generate bindings. We weren't using them, at least for our small-scale experiments. So yeah, that was an experience as well.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think Bindgen goes back somewhat far, or maybe you wanted to see Bindgen, which I'm not sure if that goes back quite as far. you have one for one direction and the other for the other. But yeah, I mean, manually written bindings are kind of a pain in the neck to maintain in my experience, especially if the APIs change.
Yep.
So, all right, so the Teor project starts experimenting with Rust, and you're one of the people actually implementing this and writing it. I mean, did that go well? How did the experiment?
Yeah, so I think we discovered what a lot of people discover when they start rewriting their code is suddenly you have two implementations, and those implementations have to be bug for bug compatible when you're working on a consensus protocol. So we learn an awful lot, and I think it was a really useful exercise. But what came out of that eventually was a decision to start fresh, to rewrite the whole thing in Rust rather than trying to run two parallel implementations, because that was challenging to try and keep them consistent.
Okay. And I assume this is open source.
Yeah.
Could you give me a sense of the scale of how much code you're rewriting all at once? Because often that's like considered a bit of an anti-pattern.
Yeah, so I think when I was there, we were just rewriting very small parts of the code and usually trying to implement, I think, some of the new or the most risky code in Rust. But yeah, then after I finished up there, they made the jump to rewrite first the client and then the server side of things in Rust.
Okay, interesting. Cool. And do you know the state of that work at this point, or?
I keep getting emails and seeing updates. No, yeah, I think it's going really well. Last thing I heard, they had got on to, was it most of the server components? I can't remember exactly, but they've made a lot of progress. And
okay, so I actually finished what the client side, it sounds like, and moved on to the server.
I think so. Yeah, I would have to check.
Cool. So, yeah, I guess that's a good segue into my next thing. So you're building a bunch of manually written bindings. I suppose that may have had an influence on why you wanted to get involved in Rust Interop.
Yeah. So, similarly, job after that, manual bindings this time to C++, but I think we were using the bind gens as well. And maybe there was some CXX involved. It was a big combination of a lot of different build tools, and that can be really challenging. So seeing how that worked as well, and when you change things and you change them the wrong way, you'd get these very weird errors. Making the switch to working on Interop directly was great because I got to see things from the other side and go, okay, well, this is why it didn't quite work out, and these are the kinds of challenges that exist in the compiler and in the tooling.
Yeah, nice. So you've seen the technical problems. You're kind of scratching your own itch. You've been at the Rust Foundation for I think 4 or 5 months. Is that right?
Since February. It feels like a very long time, but it's 3
or 4. So my sense is that you've really hit the ground running. What was the first project that you took on?
So to start with, the project goal and sort of the main project is mapping the problem space. So listing out the different problems that people encounter when they try and do Rust and C++ interop, and collecting a bunch of details. So each problem is well defined. So you have things like what the problem is, some code examples, who knows about it, where it's encountered, all of those kinds of things. But stopping, what's been tried previously to fix it, but stopping before the actual fixes. And the reason for that is to provide context so that when people attempt to fix the problem, they don't need to go and redo all of that research and find that background again. So writing a bunch of documents and tracking use cases for interop as tickets so that we can link them to different problem statements.
Neat. Is your sense that you're mapping out this problem space? Is it easy to keep up to date, or are you worried that it just falls out of freshness after some time?
I mean, that's part of the role, is tracking, reading a lot of Zulip conversations and tracking updates that are relevant to interop and writing them down somewhere so that, when me or someone else comes back to look at it, there are specific posts or specific things they can read rather than trying to drink from the fire hose of Zulip.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can definitely say firsthand, drinking from the fire hose of Zulip is a pain, and it is just a very complex problem space. So mapping it out is definitely helpful. So was this your first time working within the Rust project?
Yeah, I'd kind of been keeping track of where things were at as a Rust user, and also I worked with Jane on a previous job, and she went to, I think, work for the Rust project, or was paid to work with the Rust project. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a great job. So yeah, that was just been keeping track of where things are at. But yeah, this is the first time making significant contributions.
And what has that experience been like for you?
People have been great. Yeah, I think it was good to start with the problem space mapping because it was something that I could do myself and there weren't a lot of blockers. So I wasn't waiting on people to provide information or review things. It was just, there was a whole bunch of stuff that needed to be read and written down and summarized. The other thing that I've been doing is we identified some high priority problems. And so I've started work on some of those, and that's getting into compiler experiments and feature design and those kinds of things.
Cool. Yeah, tell me about those. Tell me about some of the experiments that you're working on.
So one of the high priority problems we identified was overloading. So C++ has a concept of overloading. Rust doesn't really. There are ways to overload methods, but it doesn't really have the scope of the C++ feature. So working on an experiment to make it possible to overload function calls and method calls. And then once the experiments merge, we're going to see how Rust's trait overlap rules affect sort of typical C++ overloads. Because that's the real question, is can we kind of keep the Rust rules, but then work out a way to call C++ overloads?
Right, because you want to be able to call the functions, even if it's not a first-class feature in Rust to do overloading. Makes sense. And so you're working on this experiment. Like, what are the what do you actually do? Are you working in the compiler? Are you?
Yeah, so it's a lot of fairly tricky compiler code. So it kind of I feel like I've gone through multiple layers of the compiler, because you start by, we have to have a way to mark where we want to do overloads. So you start dealing with parsing and attributes, and then, but how we do overloads impacts type checking. So we need to modify type checking, and then we have to turn that into code that actually runs. So yeah, I've had to very, very quickly learn about 3 or 4 different layers of the compiler. And that is, some things are easy to find out. Other things, the APIs maybe aren't as intuitive, or maybe I don't have in my head the concepts that people are working with. So,
yeah, I do find that, like, while the Rust compiler has some pretty amazing documentation in the form of the Rust CDev guide, it's definitely not complete. And there is a lot of, let's say, institutional knowledge that you have to get through Zulip and through other channels. Have you been able to get help from people that work in the compiler?
Yeah. People have been really good. I think most of the time I've just been able to work it out. It just maybe takes a little bit longer. But when I've got stuck on things, people have been great, or I've put up something that almost works and got some good reviews saying, just do it this way, just do it that way. I go, I was looking for a function for that.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I mean, I think there's a project goal for doing this. Actually, I think I might have written that project goal.
I think you might have, yeah.
And so that was, I think, probably helpful in terms of getting you some like dedicated support from people on the compiler team. Yeah, that's good. I always love it when we're able to like show up with a problem and get people the support that they need. And they don't just feel like they're in a box by themselves. Cool. So you've been working on the overloading thing. Do you have any other projects or plans on the horizon right now?
Yeah, so the other thing we kind of identified as a high priority was the first experience of somebody trying to add Rust to a C++ project. So what happens when you try and do that? Does the Rust compiler give you good, or does Cargo or whatever give you a good output that you can link in? Do you get good error messages when something goes wrong? So that's the other thing I've been working on in the background. One of the ways that I've been working on that is we had some outreachy applicants, and so one of the tasks we set for them was create a code example using Rust and C++ interop. And we had quite an amazing response to that. I think, I don't know what it was, 20 PRs or something like that. But now what we have is a list of people's experiences when they first try and do interop. And at some stage, I'll sit down and I'll have a look and I'll summarize what went wrong, what went well, and then come up with some ways that we can maybe tweak Cargo or the Rust compiler to make that experience easier. Think of it like an informal user study. It was never really planned that way, but when you have the material, you might as well turn it into a useful document that says, these are the kinds of problems people experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I do think, we have bindgen and cbindgen, and those integrate. We're working on experimenting with deeper kinds of integration, like with the overloading stuff. But at the end of the day, if people don't have a good experience onboarding, that's one of the things Rust is really known for. So I feel like we, as a project, as a product, if we're going to be serious about interop, having good build system integration and good indents where there is really important. And that stuff is actually really hard in my experience.
Yeah. I think one of the things that came up was linker errors, and that's just really tricky because it depends on the platform you're on and
there's like two people who understand linkers in the world. So, and I'm not one of them.
Yeah. So, but I'm hoping I'll be able to write down some of the things that went wrong and get them in front of the right people to fix them.
Yeah, well, that's good. So if anyone's listening to this and they want to contribute ideas or contribute code, is there somewhere that they can go?
Yeah, so I think probably the best place is to start a conversation in the, is it T-lang interop or T-compiler?
Yeah, there's a T-lang
interop. Yeah, in Zulip. So start a thread there with what you can contribute or your ideas, and then I'm watching there, and other people are as well, and we can point you to the next steps for whatever you want to do with interop.
Cool. Well, needless to say, I'm really excited by the work that you're doing and all the energy that you're bringing to the space. So, thank you for all that, and can't wait to see what comes next.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.